Today we'll be learning a little bit about platforms and a little bit about how we can use platforms to create social good. And particularly, I will talk about my sort of personal interest, which is young people in Malaysia. My name is Melati Nungsari. I'm an assistant professor of economics at Asia School of Business. I previously, before returning to Malaysia, I was based in the US. I hold an affiliation at MIT as a research affiliate, and I have taught students in 3 different countries from over 30 nationalities. So I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I'll leave my contact details if you guys have any more questions or sort of want to take the conversation forward with this. At ASB, I teach platform theory. I also teach industrial economics for managers. And in particular, I sort of specialize in labor economics. So basically, how do people get jobs? How do firms organize themselves? How are prices set, etc. So let's go ahead and start. All right. So the sort of main idea with platforms is going from a world like this. So you may be very familiar with this picture, a Malaysian pasar malam, right? We're all buying stuff. We're all, sort of participating in a physical marketplace. But the idea of platforms and the idea of digitalization is that we're going sort of from a very high touch world to something perhaps like this. So this is a platform that was launched during MCO, actually, in Malaysia. And it was sort of an attempt to bring a physical market like the night market digital. So let's go ahead and look at one more example. So another idea of a platform is sort of going from this. So this is just a stock photo I found, but really it's about ordering. So if you think about how restaurants used to do ordering, in Malaysia, and in my research, I've spoken to a lot of people to try and understand the supply chain of food. Now, for a lot of restaurants, the way they used to do ordering was the chef would realize, okay, I don't have carrots today, I don't have rice today. So I'm just going to write it down on a piece of paper, and I'm going to think about this when I go to the market next. So this perhaps you can think about as sort of being a very inefficient way of doing things. So platform businesses enable us to sort of go from this world where we have, physical writing down what you need, grocery listing, to perhaps a world like this. Food Market Hub is actually a Malaysian startup that has been doing pretty well with aggregating, restaurant suppliers, restaurants, farmers, and customers on their platform to provide you sort of a one-stop comprehensive ecosystem where restaurants can order, consumers can order directly from farms, and suppliers can actually get their produce to people who actually want to buy them, like consumers. So in terms of, I may be telling you something that you think is just how businesses work. And what I'm going to try to convince you today is that that's not actually true. And that platforms are sort of fundamentally very different than how traditional businesses are. So what are platforms? Basically, all the sort of big companies in the region and in the world currently are either platforms themselves or contain sort of a subsection that is devoted to running a platform. So we have sort of the big Southeast Asian giants. We have Gojek, we have Grab, we have Lazada, we have Food Panda. Visa is also a platform. Nintendo, Apple iOS, which I will talk about in just a second. Marketplaces such as gig economy marketplaces. So you can kind of think about Upwork being an example of the labor market platform, Mudah.my, so job market platforms, e-commerce, all of these businesses can be categorized as platforms. But you may still be asking yourself, right? So again, why are platforms different than traditional businesses? So let's go ahead and delve a little bit into a definition of platforms that economists use, business people use, and sort of to give you a little bit of background as to why these types of businesses are different. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and delve into sort of a standard definition of platforms. This definition was actually created by 2 faculty members at ASB, Pablo and Sam. So we're going to go ahead and look at, what economists and academics and actually practitioners as well think about platforms when they talk about platforms. So essentially, platforms are intermediaries. They facilitate interaction between users who are either explicitly affiliated with that intermediary, meaning you are purchasing a membership into that platform, or it provides you basically an ecosystem where you can technologically innovate on that platform. So what do I mean by the second point? Well, Apple iOS does not really charge you membership to be a software developer on the platform. However, it provides you with sort of this ecosystem where you can use the technology to innovate while on the platform. And so the idea with platforms is that it sort of generates what we call a salient relationship between participants rather than just the provision of a good or service. And what do I mean by this? We're going to talk a little bit now about this idea of arm's length. So what do I mean by interactions and facilitating and salience and all these big words? Basically, let's think about a factory. So if you have a chair factory, right? Makes chairs. They're workers at a worker at the factory. They make chairs. People buy chairs. A factory sort of facilitates interactions between workers and consumers. Workers make the chairs, customers buy the chairs, but there's no really salient relationship, so sort of meaningful relationship between the two, right? I, in particular, don't really care that much about the workers at the chair factory, and the workers at the chair factory don't particularly care about who buys their chairs and sort of what characteristics I have as a customer. And so without this arm's length restriction, the salience, this meaningful restriction, virtually any platform, any business could actually be considered a platform. And so salience in particular means, again, affiliation and framework or ecosystems to innovate and build on. And so one thing I wanted to mention as well is that when people talk about platforms, people often talk about the platform economy, which is sort of the cultural, the economic, the social activities enabled by the platforms. You may have heard of how couch surfing started. So a website basically which brings people who want sort of a couple of nights to spend on somebody's couch and people who actually have space to rent out. So the ecosystem behind that and sort of the cultural events, the phenomenon, the sort of support provided by the platform, by the society sort of that is created by the platform is generally what we call the platform economy. And also another thing to note is that while the discussion on platforms often includes non-digital platforms, the term economy typically tries to sort of only talk about online platforms. So if you think about sort of digital and non-digital platforms, we have non-digital platforms. So here is my example from Indian matchmaking. So Auntie Seema herself can sort of be seen as a platform. She connects people who are looking for a marriage, men and women. She brings them together. She charges them a price. She essentially is sort of providing a salient relationship between the two sides and is charging you a membership fee, right? Because she charges basically for her service. Now, she is a platform and what she does create sort of an ecosystem around her, but she is very different than say Tinder, right? So Tinder, same thing, right? Brings people together, charges membership. If you want an upgraded tick next to your name or sort of special fancy features, you pay more. Also a platform, but again, a digital one. So I just wanted to sort of make this clear is that, when we talk about platforms, it doesn't mean that they're all digital platforms, but typically when we talk about platforms, that's basically what we mean. All right, so a couple of things now with sidedness. So a platform can be two-sided. So I started out my PhD talking about online dating, so I tend to motivate things using online dating. So Coffee Meets Bagel is an online website. There are men and women. This is sort of a two-sided platform. So the intermediary connects the women and the men. There is a salient relationship because you pay fees to sort of join the platform. You care about who's on the other side of the market. Men care what type of women are on the market. I'm more willing to pay higher prices if I know or sort of what I want is in the other side more, right? And so this is what we call a two-sided platform. But in terms of sidedness, nowadays, with sort of the advent of big data and stuff like that, we actually have sort of multi-sided worlds where, for example, Google can be seen as a three-sided platform, where we have websites, we have ads, and we have users. And in fact, sort of one of Google's main revenue generating activities is sort of the ad side of things, right? So you can talk about sort of four-sided, five-sided, all sorts of different sided platforms, but it's very interesting to note, what's very interesting to note is that in order to understand how to operate one, how to sort of perform in one, you need to understand how many sides you actually have. And I can't delve too much into sort of identifying this, but this is something you should know as sort of your platform 101. All right, and so what I do at ASB and sort of with the exec ed and sort of MBA classes that I teach is I teach market design, which essentially is what we call microengineering. So microengineering is this idea where a platform can sort of be seen at its own world. And you are sort of the god of this world. You create the rules, you sort of, you limit who can be in your world. You try and sort of groom people to be the type of people you want them to be. All of this can typically be managed in a platform by using a variety of different ways. We tend to call these ways instruments. So pricing is an instrument. For example, if you do not want a certain type of person in, you could price them out. You can set a higher price. Screening is another instrument. If you only want, for example, beautiful people on your dating website, you can have a team that actively screens out people who you think are not beautiful in order to improve sort of the effectiveness of this platform for your users. You can use a variety of different instruments to sort of create your world. But I wanted to go into really quick, just 3 sort of main criteria for good marketplaces. So this is from Al Roth. He won the Nobel Prize in economics in 2012. And he spoke about, from his decades-long research, sort of 3 criteria for good marketplaces. And now let's just go ahead and look into those a little bit more. Markets basically need to provide thickness. So thickness is this idea that you need to have enough people or enough companies, enough economic agents, so users on your platform, such that there is enough people there to satisfy people's other users' wants or sort of needs for choice, right? So the idea of thickness is that you need to have enough people on the platform so that your users actually have enough people to sort of interact with and form transactions with. So let me give you one example here. This was kind of a silly example, but sort of gets at the anti-thickness a little bit, so I like to use it. This guy, Aaron Smith from last year, he created a dating site so exclusive that he was the only person on this website. Now, this would be sort of an anti-thickness or a very thin marketplace, because again, if women were to join this marketplace, the only man they can match with would be Aaron, right? And so most people do not join marketplaces for thinness. Most people join marketplaces for thickness, meaning I join an online dating website because I want to look through my options. I want to go on a couple dates, maybe a lot of dates, and try to figure out whether or not I want to sort of marry this person. But this platform would be an example of a very thin one where essentially when you enter it, you have virtually only one choice, which is not what people like. In this day and age, people like choices, right? But choices come with caveats though. So thickness is something you want, but one issue with thickness is that with thickness typically comes congestion. So what do I mean by congestion? Congestion means that despite the fact that you have to have many people on your platform, you cannot have too many because of this problem called search costs. So search costs is this idea basically in economics where the more you have to search for something, the more costly it is for you and the more you don't like it. So people don't actually like, for example, having too much choice. If you think about in Malaysia, in supermarkets, we sort of have, a whole big aisle of different types of soy sauces, right? So we have all the different types of soy sauces, we have different brands, we have different colors, different tastes, so thick, thin, salty, sweet. And so the idea is that we want some variety. So I want to be able to buy sweet soy sauce when I want to. I want to be able to buy thick soy sauce when I want to. However, the problem is that if there are too many bottles of soy sauce on the shelves, I actually have to search through it, which inconveniences me, which I don't like because I'm always in a rush, and customers nowadays are always in a rush anyway. And so that sort of imposes a very large congestion effect on me. I don't like that, right? So the tricky part here is you need thickness, you need there to be choices, but you can't overwhelm people with choices. And the third part that I'll talk about later relates to sort of another issue of this. But before that, I wanted to share with you my favorite example of congestion, which is a kedai runcit. So a small convenience store in Malaysia. You can kind of look at this. I grew up in Penang where we had tons of these. And so here you see they have pretty much everything, right? The problem is that though, the uncle is probably the only person who knows where everything is, and your search costs are very high. So I can't really, sort of come out from work and have 5 minutes and say, okay, I really want some chili sauce. I'm going to get it right now, but I have this specific type, and just sort of go there and in and out in 30 seconds. That's not really possible in this situation. It's congested, right? And so this would be an example of a very thick marketplace, but one that is, again, very congested. The third criteria for the good marketplace is this idea of safety. So safety is basically this concept that typically the platform has to ensure, whereby when you bring people together in a marketplace, you want them to both be safe when they're interacting, and two, be safe in revealing information about themselves that they may not want to. So what do I mean by this? So let me give you an example with Didi in China. So Didi was, a carpool, sort of a car sharing or not car sharing, car ride hailing, that's the term, ride hailing service. And they relaunched late last year, and the issue with this was that their carpooling service actually had, I think, a serial killer on it who was basically going through and killing women, right? So 2 women were actually murdered through this platform because they used it, because perhaps Didi did not screen enough the type of people who were participating as drivers. And so you can kind of think about, this issue of safety as being one where, well, ideally, I want to know if you are somebody who's going to kill people. I want to know if you are an unsafe driver. I want to know if you are a food delivery person and you have terrible hygiene. These are characteristics about users that you really want to know, right? And so how can you ensure this aspect of safety? There are a lot of ways, but one way, typical way, is ratings, right? So ratings, reviews, provides more information in a marketplace, and because I'm an economist, I will always tell you that more information is better, right? So knowing more about the people in the marketplace is going to be better for you, and in fact going to be safer for every user on the marketplace, in the marketplace at the end of the day. So we have basically thickness, congestion, and safety as being sort of criteria for good marketplaces. Now that you know this, let's think a little bit more. Okay, so again, I told you about salience. I told you about 3 things. What is a main differentiating factor of platforms? And we can go on forever on this, but essentially the idea is network effects. So the idea basically that the value of a service or product you're using increases in the number of people who are using it. This is very strange, actually, right? So going back to my chair factory, the value of my chair does not actually increase the more chairs, the same type of chair people buy. Think about an IKEA chair, right? The value of the chair itself does not increase the more people own the chair. In fact, you can argue it probably decreases because it's sort of this mass-made, commodity type of chair. But with platforms and sort of the services on platforms, it's different. So for example, let's take Visa. Visa is a platform that connects merchants, so people who accept Visa as payment, to people like you and I, basically, who have Visa cards in our wallets, right? The more merchants accept Visa, the more likely I am to hold a Visa card because I can pay with it at more places. And vice versa. So the more users have Visa cards in their wallets, the more likely it is for your pasamalampachi to accept Visa as a form of payment. Because again, why wouldn't he? Everybody has a Visa card. It's the same thing with Apple iOS as well. So Apple iOS is a platform. The more apps there are available on Apple iOS, the more likely you are to own an Apple phone. The more Apple phone users there are out there, the more likely it is for software developers to develop apps to be used on the phone. So the main sort of thing is this idea of network effects, meaning the more people use this, the more useful it actually is, and the more you can actually sell your product. And in particular, the main value proposition is access to high quality populations defined by however you're setting up your platform, If it's dating, maybe you want only beautiful, rich people on there. If it's e-commerce, maybe you only want high quality things. If you specialize in sort of secondhand goods, maybe you only want secondhand goods and you don't want firsthand goods. So high quality being defined by the market itself. Populations that are otherwise hard to reach, meaning if there is high search costs, right? The higher people's search costs are, the more valuable platforms are as a business. So I've kind of told you very quickly, I think, platforms, what do you need in order to run a successful marketplace? What makes platforms different? And now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how platforms can actually be used for social good in sort of the remaining 3 minutes that I have right now. So to do this, let me sort of bring you back to young people, to sort of my own work. So we know that Malaysia is a very young country. This is the age distribution from the last census done in 2010. As you can see at the bottom here, our people are very young, right? And the problem was sort of in the recent times is, of course, COVID. So coronavirus has sort of negatively affected everybody in society, but I think youth even more. So how can we sort of help the youth? Well, to do that, we kind of need to know what do they want, right? And so 77% of youth in developing countries actually dream of starting their own business. And more disadvantaged groups, such as B40 in Malaysia, are more likely to actually be self-employed or have their own business. So 34.1% compared to 25% overall. So given that we have a lot of young people, we have a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs, one thing that we have done at ASB, funded by Siri Foundation, has been investing in training Malaysian youth in business and entrepreneurship. So we've trained over 700 Malaysian youth. We have incubated dozens of startups at this point, and we keep on sort of studying how can we help these people. And our research agenda has changed a little bit because of coronavirus, and I'm really excited to see how we can use platforms to help this very large group of Malaysians, very motivated, very business-minded people who are going to be in a lot of trouble due to sort of higher unemployment, lack of jobs, and sort of all the economic insecurities that comes with the coronavirus. So just to give you sort of a little hint here, these are pictures drawn by youth in Semporna. So these are 17-year-olds about to graduate high school, going into the world, and sort of thinking about what they want to do. And the interesting thing that we found is that a lot of them actually do want to own businesses and want to be successful at businesses, or they have products. They make kueh, they make little modifications on things, and they try and sell them, right? So how can we help this group through platforms? And so the thing that I wanted to leave you with is, even though platforms are sort of this thing that seems really techy, really high tech sort of big data type things, but I believe that platforms actually are going to be one solution for us to help the youth in particular and disadvantaged groups in Malaysia by lowering barriers to market entries. I believe that they can empower young entrepreneurs, especially in sort of a low touch because of the virus, but high connectivity world. So in particular, we are trying to now study whether or not we can take products produced by young Malaysian entrepreneurs and sort of market them through an e-commerce platform, or a sort of aggregator platform that can then sort of bring their products to the world, increase their market space, increase their ability to make a living for themselves. So platforms are a very exciting sort of topic. I can go on about it for a long time, but I believe that's basically it. So if you have any questions, if you scan this QR code, it will take you to my website. Or I can be contacted also through Asia School of Business, my email, my Twitter account. I do book reviews as well, so that's kind of fun. But yeah, so that's basically it. Thank you.